Thank you, Gary. I have been very disappointed with the lack of dancing from the rest of my team, so that was as much as you get from Gary and I at the moment, but wait till cocktails later, especially as Gary's been doing Stoptober, so he could be anyone's. Well, he could. So I will be hosting the panel session, but before I do that, what I just wanted to introduce to you all is the state of employee engagement. Hopefully you may have seen it online already, you may well have downloaded your own copies, but if not, thanks to our wonderful marketing team, you have your own pocket-size version to take home today and to have a read through as we conduct the panel, and you can think of some horrible questions to ask them because I told them not to panic. But that's what we do. So if we just switch. Oh, I haven't got the clicker. Oh, Gary did tell me. So since 2018, we've been running this piece of research. And for us, it's really important to learn and listen from the industry. So we've surveyed over 450 HR professionals to understand what your challenges are in terms of employee engagement, what you're focusing on in terms of priorities, and making sure that we realign towards those and can better guide you as partners in this journey in terms of improving employee experience and harness that together. This is something that we're really proud of, and I do say since 2018, so since the birth of WorkBuzz. And this is a little bit of a link as well that I wanted to pick up, understanding that Steve obviously did the introduction of the brands that we've worked with for the last 5 years. But there's more of you in this room that as individuals have also been working with us at WorkBuzz or Smith & Henderson in our previous guys, as individuals and taking us to different brands where you've continued to be part of our community, made sure that we worked with you in partnership at different organisations. And as a person, as an individual, there's nothing that makes me feel prouder, because what that demonstrates is that we are being successful in working with you and that we're making that change together to improve other people's working lives. So I think a lot of you know who you are. One of them's on the panel. I've already told her that she could grab a box of chocolates, but a couple of you also on the tables I can see, like Kat, Di, anyone else that has worked with us and taken us elsewhere. I'm just thinking, sorry, I don't have my whole list here. Please come up to the front once we have another break and grab a box of chocolates, because we couldn't have done this journey without you. Thank you. Right, so there's lots of priorities within this, and there's a lot of data points, because you know WorkBuzz, what would we be without any data? But those top 3 priorities that we're seeing are around retention, well-being, and recruitment. But there's been some big movers and shakers. It's like top of the pops, where things have gone up and down. And as Steve mentioned earlier, learning and development we've seen drop quite dramatically, and performance and productivity rise to the top. Now, it's all very well me telling you what these trends are, but I haven't worked in-house for at least 7 years, because I've been busy doing this job. So what I want to do is ask a wonderful panel of people that are currently within people teams to come and join me on the stage. So Gary, David, Eleanor, could you please come up? And what I will ask them to do is introduce themselves when they get up here. Welcome all. Thank you for that. I was promised an interpretive dance by one of the panel members. I'm not saying who, Gary, but that will be for later. Thank you. So first of all, what would be great is if you could all just introduce yourselves to the audience. So the first person I'm going to ask to introduce yourself is David, because we are actually, after all, in one of your hosted venues, aren't we?
Yeah, hi, so I'm David. I work for Leonardo Hotels and have done for about 3.5 years now. So I actually joined the company about a week before the pandemic hit, so it was all sort of new, exciting, and then I got stuck at home and didn't come into a hotel for about 12 months after that point. But welcome to my hotel. Hope you're all having a nice time. We started working with WorkBuzz about a year ago now, so we're sort of starting to get a bit more data in terms of gathering those sort of data points and starting to act on that, and really interested to kind of share what we've learned so far with you today.
Thank you. Gary.
Hello everybody, I'm Gary Jackson. I'm a post-industrial noise musician and a grandfather, and I just happen to be head of HR for a supply chain logistics company as well, Houston Logistics. I've been with now for 16 years, all the time in HR, but prior to that, I've been a professional musician. I've worked as a process engineering manager, a facilities manager, an HR manager, a debt collector, a motorcycle courier, and a professional musician. That's me. Oh, you've got one.
And Eleanor, last but
Hi
not least.
everyone, lovely to be here. I'm Eleanor Hector and I look after internal communications at Prezzo. For those who haven't heard of Prezzo, Italian restaurants. We've got 96 restaurants all over the UK and a support centre here in London. Almost 2,000 employees as well. You might have guessed that we're all foodies, myself being one of them, but our people are all super passionate about food and what we do. I look after all the internal communications and engagement and have worked with WorkBuzz for 4 years, I think, through multiple different companies. So.
Great to have you here. Yeah, thank you. So thank you, wonderful panel, for joining us. And I'm really excited about these brands. And as you can see, they're all deskless, pretty much, mostly, but very different industries that we're seeing, and well, some names that we also struggle to pronounce. So for ages, we've still been calling Leonardo Hotels Jury's Inn because we can't keep up with the change sometimes. Prezzo or Prezzo, that has been a big debate within the WorkBuzz office, but we're educating ourselves and learning very quickly about how to speak Italian. So that's really helpful. And I'm really excited to have this team here, and especially those different areas of the people team represented, because that will hopefully give us some different perspectives on the questions that I'm going to ask. So, starting with my first question, I mentioned that there's been a lot of moves around priorities in terms of people teams and HR professionals. But one thing that we've really seen, and Steve alluded to this again, is that the hard priorities, performance, productivity, have shifted right up to number 4 in our charts in terms of HR's priorities. Certain things that are better for the long-term future of a business, like learning and development, have dropped down, and areas like EDI aren't there in our top 4. Why do you think performance and productivity are now at the forefront of HR priorities? And as I'm asking the HR at this panel this, I'm going to ask Gary to pick up the question first, but I'm also going to ask you all to fill out the poll that we're going to run at the same time. So here is the poll. Fill it out as we go. And Gary, back on the question of why are performance and productivity now at the forefront of priorities?
Oh, thanks. I think essentially this is a response to the challenging, uncertain and turbulent times that organisations are facing across many, many sectors. There has been an awful lot of effort and investment in engagement-related initiatives over the past many years. And much of that has been taken on the basis of research and polls and anecdotal evidence from other organisations or institutions. And I think now that organisations who are facing challenges are very much looking to protect profit, to protect security, they're asking the question, you know, my engagement's gone up by 3% this year, so what? We've done 10,000 hours of training more this year than last year, so what? We've invested in well-being, we've got double the number of mental health first aiders, so what? So I think rather than dispense with the soft metrics, they are still very important. I think there is a swing in the balance towards harder metrics as well. I think another reason is, we know that things like engagement can be intangible, but Gallup, the polling organisation, have been running international engagement polls for many, many years. And it is stark fact that despite all of the millions that has been invested by organisations in the UK, time and money for years and years and years, in the last 12 years, employee engagement in the UK has fallen by 40%. And, that's not a great indictment of the work that many of us as HR professionals and our colleagues are putting into engagement initiatives. When you look at that in context, you know, Germany, Australia, even Afghanistan is running higher levels of employee engagement than the UK. The US, 3.5 times. The country Mali in Africa is running 4.5 times more employee engagement than the UK, and they've been in a civil war for 12 years. So clearly, we've known for a long time that productivity in the UK has been lagging behind many of the OECD comparators. We can see now that engagement is lagging. So I think this shift towards harder measures is very much about, we're doing all this, so what?
Yep. Really fascinating. I think as you were speaking, it very nicely reflected the poll, as in you were saying both are just as important. Maybe a lean towards more having harder metrics, and quite clearly it's represented in the audience that we have here and the people participating in this poll. David, considering your role in particular as well, you're in a little bit of a different role that's quite specified and focused on financials, let's be honest. There's a good part of that role. What are your thoughts around the focus on harder metrics?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think in particular the context around kind of what's happened over the last few years, obviously the pandemic's kind of really shaped a lot of stuff, and I think what became very kind of apparent during the pandemic is a lot of businesses started talking more about kind of well-being and those sort of intangible metrics, soft metrics as we call them, of, how are our employees feeling and are we doing enough to support them and that kind of thing. And I think Gary's kind of right, as it's sort of, now we've kind of moved out of the pandemic, those priorities have sort of shifted back to those hard metrics, and it's now more about kind of, okay, we've done it, we've ticked off, we've done the D&I review, we've introduced some new well-being, that kind of thing, and it's almost, I suppose it could be interpreted as a bit of a fight for HR to keep relevance and sort of keep those soft metrics to the forefront of the business, whereas hard metrics are a lot easier to measure. And it's almost like a kind of shift back to that kind of post-pandemic. So I think there's challenges for HR teams to kind of make sure that we keep those soft metrics at the forefront. But yeah, I think they've probably fallen by the wayside perhaps over the last few years, and now they're kind of coming back again, really. So it's all kind of to do with context, I suppose, with that.
Agreed. Eleanor, anything to add?
Well, I think Gary and David both summarised it really well, but what I would add is that in terms of it being a climate change and a mindset change, but what I would add is, and to the poll's point of it being a mixture of both, you often say, right, I feel like we should do this, but actually, where's the metrics to back it up? So going in with both is a lot stronger in that way. And I think as well, people are more aware of burnout and frustrations with changes in focus. Often things are changing so quickly, and that leads to less productivity. Yep. So HR teams in particular are thinking about, right, let's tackle this head on and avoid that from happening.
Yeah, very true. And I think that's really interesting around the well-being piece. I mean, it's number 2 on our priorities. We are seeing, as Perry shared, higher levels of stress and anxiety, but also the openness to discuss it. And part of me, as a bit of a data geek, does question us seeing the highest levels ever, because is it just that a lot of it has been masked in the past, and now we're more open and forthcoming with our data points. Perry's also created me a huge problem, I don't think he's realised, where he's talked about linking employee engagement through to lifespan, divorce rates. I mean, at WorkBuzz, we could actually do it with pregnancy rates. I think we're leading actually that at the moment. So some really interesting ways of calculating return on investment that we will need to pick up, and John Backhouse is coming on your desk, I think, for People Science to review as to how we get this data. How do we build that picture to demonstrate not just return on investment for a business, but for those better lives and social impact, which goes back to the climate piece. Right. Moving into question number 2. So which aspects of this year's report have resonated with you the most? David, I'll come to you first for this question. It's best to share. Got one.
So I've actually got a list in front of me so I don't forget what's written down there. So I think probably the thing that resonated the most is, and we've seen it a lot in our business itself, is all to do with retention, really. So in particular with hotels, obviously we kind of shut down during the pandemic, and once we were allowed to reopen, we found ourselves in a place of we don't have enough staff basically to make our hotels work correctly. So a lot of kind of the first sort of 12 to 18 months of reopening hotels was all around kind of getting the new employees back into the business and then sort of trying to retain them enough to, you know, be able to kind of service our rooms and do all the F&B work that we need to do, that kind of thing really. So on top of that, you know, we probably doubled our headcount in 12 months to make sure that we kind of got back up to speed from where we were. And that obviously meant we had a lot of turnover, and we probably made some hires in more normal times that we wouldn't have done. So I suppose the shift for us was from recruitment, which is still quite high on the list, to that kind of retention piece. And it's certainly a metric that we use within our company is, you know, we try and measure, you know, how long do we retain people, do we get people past probation periods, that sort of thing as well. So that's really, really important. I think one thing was sort of surprised me a little bit about the results was that learning and development has kind of fallen so far down the list, and to me that's almost kind of should be tied with retention. So yeah, the way that we try and, you know, retain people is by training them up, promoting people into supervisor roles, or we have all sorts of courses to, you know, bring on the next managers of tomorrow, that kind of thing as well. So yeah, that seems a bit sort of disjointed, that retention's really high up there, but then actually training employees up isn't quite so high. So I thought that was an interesting thing to consider as well.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating when you look at the report, and you know, the key challenges around recruitment and retention typically are to do with the skill shortages as well, but we're not willing to invest in our current workforce to get them there. Which demonstrates a very short-term view as a business, and you really need to be thinking about the long term and what pipeline of talent you have coming through the ranks. Eleanor, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'll start by saying I was very pleased that internal comms was a new addition to
Yay.
the list, albeit it was at the bottom, so hopefully that rises year by year.
Yeah.
Because I do think it is an important part of every colleague touch point. But definitely resonate with retention being at the top. In hospitality, retention is always a challenge. Yeah. We've got a very young demographic of people. It's often their first job or a part-time job. They're in education. So they don't really see Prezzo as a long-term career choice. So we've tried to shift mindsets in terms of, actually, these are our development pathways, and we've launched new apprenticeship programs, specifically Chef Academy, to progress up-and-coming chefs. Also a new development program for managers and all of our support centre. So there really is loads of opportunities to stick with us and grow and develop. Recruitment as well, I think it was third within the priorities. Is still also a challenge and been one of our focuses, or continues to be one of our focuses. And we want to make sure that we're recruiting by our values and recruiting the right people. And we actually used a new tool that pinpoints what people's natural skills are. So it really helps placing people in the right restaurant. So, for example, going through the tool, you might identify that someone flourishes in is a proper go-getter. So you wouldn't put them in a quieter restaurant where they might potentially get bored. They probably would flourish in one of our busy London restaurants. And that really helps to recruit the right people, put them in the right place, and then make sure that they can flourish in that role and grow and develop and enjoy work.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and it very much plays into finding people's natural strengths, their natural personas, and it's not brain science and it's not magic what we're trying to create. We're just trying to get people to do work that they enjoy. That's all that it takes for us to take over the world, team. That's my mandate after leaving here. But no, that's really interesting, and I love that kind of sideway progression, and there's lots of ways for us to upskill. It's not just moving on up and getting leadership job after leadership job after leadership job. There's so many other ways to progress and grow. Gary, what are your thoughts on this and what's resonated with you?
Thank you. The thing that struck me straight away was the new entry at number 7. Back to the top of the pops, for those that remember when it was good. New entry at number 7, leadership. And that struck me for a couple of reasons. Firstly, that it was a new entry, and here we are in 2023 and it's a new entry. But secondly, that it was only at number 7, because from my perspective, a lot of the other things that are on here are really symptomatic of the capability of leadership. Recruitment, retention, performance, productivity. You know, these are things that we in HR can play whack-a-mole with, and then we'll have a recruitment initiative and a retention initiative, and we'll do some well-being. But it doesn't matter how much you spend or how much time you put into it or how sophisticated that is. If your leadership, both as individuals and as a team, a cohesive team, are malfunctioning, dysfunctional, incapable, then it's not going to work. It's not going to work because that leadership element of your working experience is far more potent than almost anything else in the business. And you know, Perry's nodding. Much of what Perry was saying, all of what Perry was saying, really did kind of chime with me in that respect. So, you know, I think we've got to recognise that if we focus on the whack-a-moling without really investing the time, the effort and the energy in understanding, do our leaders lead? Do they know how to lead? And I don't mean by that they've been through a leadership training course. We've put them through the sheep dip. They know what to do. They've got the targets. We've done a PDR. Off they go. You know, I think the CMI reported last week, in fact, I think it was, that you know, one of the biggest factors in organisational performance is, have leaders been trained? And I don't think that's entirely accurate, because I've seen many leaders trained whose behaviours subsequently doesn't reflect that training. You know, they've done the training, they've come out and they're back into the organisation that they were in before, behaviours as they were before, but the box has been ticked. Aren't we good? And I think where we, as a profession, and I'm sure there are people in this room that do a far better job than I do, but I think where we miss out as a profession is, what do we really do outside of that tick box to promote, to encourage, to nurture capable leaders? You know, and I think, you know, seeing it on number 7 is great. I think, you know, for me, it should be number 1. And if it's not number 1, there's a problem.
Great, thank you. A brilliant different perspectives from a very varied panel. What are your thoughts on this question? If everyone could just answer this poll, this would be really interesting, especially after they've argued their cases. Who's won your vote? It's like running for Pierre. It's me. There is a reason I've definitely invited Gary here, as you can see. Like, the challenger mindset is so important, isn't it? And as HR professionals, I know you're all smirking in the room when he said, oh, we've all had a leader that's been on training and then behaves in a certain way. We've all been there, we've all seen it, we've all experienced it. But it is really interesting, that piece around capability and it's shifting. And clearly it has won the ear of quite a few of you in the room at the moment as well. But almost what is done at the top typically will cascade through, and making sure that that's picked up. But really interesting. And the other thing that you just mentioned there was whack-a-mole, which, if anyone's here post 5 o'clock, that could be a bit of a hint as to what's to come, though I think there was an image earlier that might have displayed there is a whack-a-mole to play on. Okay. Oh, that's definitely not the answers, was it? Well, it's all right. It's all right. We'll move forward. Schools on the doors later. Yeah, but leadership and then retention, we're all struggling with it, aren't we? But once we've got the great talent, we've got to keep it. And we don't want to lose it, really. It's just thinking about how you keep them and make sure that the best talent stays for the right time, because what their priorities are and what their hidden reasons for leaving are, as we described earlier, might not be the reasons that they tell you upon exit. Okay, let's move on to a third question. Hey, there we go. With the recent economic changes, the landscape that we find ourselves in, what advice would you give to people that are building their people plans for the year ahead? Eleanor, let's come to you first.
Sure. I think we've heard it maybe by every speaker so far about the importance of listening, and I think it is listening to your people. It's not just a nice to have. People like to feel valued. They like to have a voice. They like to speak up, share their ideas, and feel like they've been part of something. And at Prezzo, we do this in a quite a nice way in terms of our people initiatives. We have a people focus group that we meet on a monthly basis, which is made up of a variety of people. And we go through what we're planning to launch from a people perspective and get their insights, feedback. Does it work for everyone? What are the key challenges that they see? And we actually go away and make changes off of those to make sure that they're right for the business. And it works really well. I think it's invaluable to have that and get that insight before launching anything and getting that buy-in. We've also done quite a lot of listening with a new benefits platform that we've just launched today, actually. And how we did that is first surveying our people, but we actually did focus groups off the back of that to pinpoint exactly what benefits they'd want to see. So we're not just out there guessing, oh, we think people want discounted gym memberships, for example. We know that we've gone out with an offering that people wanted to see, the benefits that they wanted to tap into. And hopefully it delivers on what they asked for. And I think it's about having that broader listening strategy. So going back to surveying, thinking about when is the best time to survey our people. Is it just before we launch something new to get their insight? Is it just after to get their feedback? And having clear pinpoints throughout the year of when to do that.
Yeah, I think that's really important, a blend of listening. Despite being a predominantly listening platform which surveys, we are big believers in speaking to people, believe it or not, and actually that can give you the richness and depth that you wouldn't get out of a survey, which is useful for the macro view, but when you need that, okay, are we doing the right thing, and almost testing communications in particular. We used to call it war room testing in a previous life, where you get somebody to be almost a troll within the room and try and rip up everything that you do. That is really critical as well, to have a trusted inner circle, and very much like our own cab at WorkBuzz, that's what we try to do as well. Right, Gary, coming to you next. The question is, how are you going to build a successful people plan over the next year?
At the risk of sounding like a hackneyed broken record, I'd say that it is certainly look to the leadership capability before you start worrying about the other bits and pieces, because the analogy I draw at work is if you've got a car and the crankshaft is fractured and it's pouring oil out of the bottom, it doesn't matter how many times you put new alloy wheels on it or how many times you paint it, it ain't going to go very far. And as I said earlier, I think leadership is very much at the heart of many of the things that we would want to be looking at improving on in a plan. Recruitment's not going to get any easier following Brexit, following the implementation of our hostile immigration environment. And given the fact that it is the case that in the pandemic, everybody had a lot more people go into the economically inactive, unemployed or training area, the NEET part of our society. Every country in the OECD has now recovered to pre-COVID levels of people in the NEET category, all but one, and that's the UK. And our level of NEET society has increased and continues to increase. So you take all those factors and recruitment will get harder and harder and harder. If you're putting all that effort and energy into recruiting people only for them to work with an incompetent or underperforming or poorly behaving leader, you're wasting all of that time and that effort, because that leader will have as great of impact on their experience as anything, and that leader will be the cause of you losing them. I think recruitment and retention are two parts of the same thing, really. I think putting lots and lots of effort into recruitment, of course, that's a sensible thing to do. But I tend to say to my colleagues, with retention, with our existing workforce, we should be thinking, why would any of our existing workforce want to come back tomorrow? We should be recruiting them almost every day. Every day, your existing workforce has to have a reason to come back to you rather than to down the road to one of your competitors. And make no bones about it, who you think you are competing with for labour today might well be somebody different tomorrow. You know, the logistics sector, the foundry sector, the comms sector, whatever it is. You know, as labour becomes more and more finite through demographic change and through our borders going up and through increasing need in society, you know, we will be competing in kind of blurred markets. So leaders, you know, it all starts with your leaders. That is your business. That is who you are remembered as. That is your employees' experience. And it's leaders creating the culture in the business that allows participation and collaboration and communication and nurturing. It's not leaders following a job description. It's not leaders hiding behind an app or a PDR system that they go through. It's leaders being people who respond to and support and encourage and motivate as people. And that's, for me, what it's all about.
Great, thank you. And I think it really rises now. We have so many different generations working here with very different needs and very different expectations. So the need for strong leadership becomes, you know, right at the forefront of everything that we do as organisations. David, what would you like to add? What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure there's much to add really after that. I think that's covered a lot really. I think what the top priorities list does kind of show us is that HR teams generally, we have to wear a lot of hats, and you know, it's not just kind of a few things we have to look at any one time. It's, you know, a list of 14 things on this, for example. So I suppose if I were to give any advice to you know, any company at all, it would just be to make sure that the focus is on just sort of 2 or 3 things at any one time, and not try and kind of, you know, push the sea back with a mop or whatever your metaphor might be.
Boil the ocean, yeah.
That's the one I use, yeah. So I think it's just kind of thinking about which of the priorities would kind of bring the most value to the business, you know, in the next 12 months, and just kind of almost doubling down and focusing on those, achieving as much as possible, and then reviewing and working off that again, and not kind of getting sucked into the the idea that you can kind of do all of it at once, I suppose, really. And yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to add one other thing from my own perspective, and this is a hint and tip for everybody about your people programme for the year ahead. Whatever you're trying to achieve, baseline where you are and demonstrate your impact for the year ahead. That is my one gift of please do think about how you demonstrate that you are an everyday hero. I found it really fascinating when we did that table discussion. All of my table were very reserved because they don't see themselves as the everyday hero. They could probably quite quickly find stories of other people within their organisation that were doing amazing jobs and making massive changes. But when we look at ourselves as HR practitioners or people, we're very less likely to put ourselves at the forefront of driving that change and being that person. But you are absolutely heroes. And sometimes I think you have to build that within yourselves. And if you're not willing to sell your own story, then let the data points do it for you. Okay? Right. With the time, I think we've got 5 minutes for questions from the audience. Are there anybody want to ask a question? We have roving mics. Oh, there we go. Can always rely on John.
Thanks. Yeah, a bit of a selfish question for my own benefit, I suppose. You mentioned about the staff benefits package you'd introduced today. I won't ask you that, how's it going or anything, but you said, you alluded to the fact it wasn't just, you know, gym memberships. I'm curious, would you mind sharing what they did say, like what things people are after, so I don't have to run my own?
Yeah, of course, because we were actually quite surprised by the results, but savings and ISAs came out really high. A couple of other things are voluntary benefits we're offering, so for example dental insurance, critical illness cover, health came out, and financial benefits came out on top, which you could probably guess, but those specific ones were quite surprising.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a real shift around well-being and financial well-being being really critical to support as an employer. People are really struggling with cost of living and inflation and all these macroeconomic factors that they can't control. And if you're struggling to meet your kind of day-to-day needs, you think that financial well-being, the impact on your mental health, your physical health, it all knocks through. And I am seeing more of a lift around if we can have the resource to support the finances of our employees, then let's do that. That's the right thing to do. And some great organisations out there with amazing purposes that are doing that work.
And as we continue through, because it's part of a 3-year strategy essentially, so we'll go back out and ask for more feedback and thoughts and then feed that back into additional benefits, because it doesn't stop here. We want to expand it more and more.
Right. So you're going to have to listen to your own.
Yeah.
Right. Any other questions? Are we checking the time? Ema.
Yeah, I've got one on the leadership capability question. If you don't necessarily have a seat at the high table in your people team, any good tips for influencing and supporting leadership capability?
No.
There we go. Yeah.
You know, it isn't always easy to influence people at the top, and if you don't have an inroad, you have to look to who your allies are who do have an inroad and work with them. I think, you know, it is not the case that the leaders who are currently leading are going to be completely deaf to what you say. And I think if you can find a way to use an ally to get a toe in the water, for me, for example, it was this combination of measures. So the WorkBuzz, I'm not doing a plug here, the WorkBuzz system has been fantastic for us to take a granular look at leadership performance from a team engagement perspective. So we can see what people are reporting for each leader in the business. We combine that with what I call the 4 A's, which is absenteeism, accidents which are unforced, attrition, and amity, which is basically formal employee relations issues, discipline and grievance. So you've got some hard measures and you've got some softer measures. And where we can, we use productivity, but we don't measure that in all areas. So you combine those and you can focus all of those around leaders, and you can see which leaders are getting the best results and which are getting weaker results. And then we take the best leaders and we encourage them to be coaches for others, to mentor others on a long-term basis. Those that are not performing so well, they get that support and whatever else support we can give them. And then we form a leadership network where individuals who are in leadership positions, whatever the level, whatever the department, can meet on a routine basis, not to talk about, you know, customer X or, you know, what's happened financially yesterday. It's about what's working as a leader, what's not working as a leader, what can you learn from each other. So it is the case that allies will work if you haven't got that voice at the top table, but having a plan as well, a strategy of how you're going to be presenting that, rather than kind of trying to get people to be convinced to invest in let's make our leadership better. You've got to know how you're going to plan to do that. I hope that helps. I'm not sure. I ramble.
No, that's useful. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I think that's our time on questions, but of course, if anybody has any other questions, then just grab the panel as soon as you see them, or just email us and we can field the questions and get a response. But I just want to use this time to say a huge thank you to all 3 of you for coming and sitting up here and sharing your experiences. It's something that I could never have brought to life myself, and I really appreciate your thoughts and opinions on this piece of research. Thank you.